Also get into the night before concerns that are mounting in the back of my mind for the New England Patriots to win this game tomorrow evening. But before I get to my man, T.O., as I used to call him, Team Obliterator, and why he wouldn't be in my Hall of Fame, quick cameo from my daughter, our daughter, Hazel, as always, as I go live here on Facebook. I don't think I can get a hold of her. She's getting, whoa, I don't have her. Oh, sorry, Hazel.
Hazel,
Sorry,
okay.
she's okay. Sorry, my wife Ernestine is trying to hand me Hazel, who's getting, thank you. Okay, it's okay. She got to clean my nose before I go live. Hi, Hazel. She got a bath today. Every Saturday she gets a bath because she gets pretty dirty during the week. So Ernestine put a little bow on her, which I don't like, but that's just me. Hi, Hazel. Thank you, Hazel. Thank you, Ernestine. That's my wife, Ernestine. That's our only child. We don't have any children except me, she always says. She has enough time, a hard time riding herd on me. But that was Hazel, and now on to subject I've written about and talked about. Going back to my first year in the Bay Area covering the San Francisco 49ers, which featured Jeff Garcia throwing to Terrell Owens. And I got to tell you, during that season, which was 2001, it was right after 9/11, if you had told me during that season that Terrell Owens would be in the Pro Football Hall of Fame, trust me, laugh out loud, literally laugh out loud. I would have said, you're joking, right? Saturday Night Live routine, right? But that was because I knew so many people on that football team and on that coaching staff and in that front office, which included the great and late Bill Walsh, with whom I got close. I love Bill Walsh. Genius. Greatest coach ever. Greatest personnel eye ever. Just pure genius. And Bill Walsh was driven a little crazy by Terrell Owens. And the first day I got to know Bill Walsh was because he called me after a radio show I did on KMBR in San Francisco. And he said, look, we need to sit and talk about Terrell Owens. And he loved Terrell. He always told me Terrell Owens was the smartest receiver up on the chalkboard, the whiteboard, that he'd ever coached. I think he coached Jerry Rice, John Taylor, I could go on. But he thought Terrell Owens' football mind was extraordinary. And yet, the rest of his mind, Bill was very concerned about because Terrell had some issues from his childhood. We all have issues from our childhood. I'm not knocking or condemning Terrell for this. I'm just telling you what went on. And Bill Walsh said, we have tried to reach him. We've got team psychologists. We've got outside psychiatrists. We've tried all kinds of sessions with him, and we just can't reach him. We can't coach him. We can't get him into our team concept. And it was really hurting Bill Walsh because he saw such extraordinary ability in Terrell Owens. And this isn't to say that Terrell wasn't successful on the field, because obviously Jeff Garcia to Terrell Owens was one of the great connections in the history of pro football. But if you could have lived with me through that year and heard, starting with Bill Walsh, the issues with Terrell Owens, and going to the GM, Terry Donahue, the issues with Terrell Owens, and going to Steve Mariucci, the coach, the mounting issues with Terrell Owens, and then player after player after player. And here's the irony of this. Trust me, anybody who read I got something in my eye, what I wrote in those days, at first I defended Terrell. He's a great player. Played with rage, man. Played like he was kind of Russell Westbrook before Westbrook. He played crazy hard every play. Randy Moss took plays off. He admitted publicly. Take some plays off. Some days he didn't feel like it. Terrell Owens played crazy hard. So I defended him. And player after player would stop me. Some of them introduced themselves to me. Some first would send me anonymous sort of email kind of notes, and then they'd pull me aside. I can't tell you how many players said, "You have no idea what you're doing defending this guy. He is tearing our team apart. He's impossible." Because he was starting to turn on the starting quarterback, Jeff Garcia. And I must admit, my instincts have always been pretty good about players, and I hung in for a while with that one, and that's the only time I ever really swung and missed early on a player, where I just didn't get it. And finally, I saw the light, because Terrell Owens tore that team apart, and it was a really good team. It had, if it had gotten hot at the right time, it had Super Bowl potential. And yet, it got so bad, we were in Chicago for a game against the Bears. Terrell had a bad second half. They had a bad fourth quarter. They had a lead. They blew the lead. Steve Mariucci against a guy he had coached with coming up the ladder, a guy I'm not sure they were close friends, but they were good friends, Dick Duran. And Terrell sat at his locker. I was right there after the game, and he just went off on Steve Mariucci and accused Mooch, as they called him, of taking his foot off the gas in the fourth quarter for the sake of his good friend across the field on the other sideline, the coach of the Bears at that point, Dick Duran. Boy, that's a charge. That you're saying you're throwing the game, you're trying to take it easy, not throwing it, but you're trying to pull back to make it look a little better for your friend Dick Duran, and you end up losing the game. Whew. Boy, it was a powerful quote. And then I did a long interview with Terrell in which he hinted at some racial mistreatment from Steve Mariucci. Maybe so. I don't know. I don't have any way. I asked Mariucci about it. He just was stunned. Like, what are you talking about? I have no idea. Nobody's ever said a word about that to me, any other player, blah, blah, blah. But that was Terrell. And there was so much blame deflecting going on. There was a game right after 9/11 in San Francisco against the arch rival, then dominant in the division, St. Louis Rams of Kurt Warner. Remember, this is 2001. You know what happened at the end of that year in the Super Bowl was the launching of the Patriot dynasty. And Terrell Owens in that game, I can't remember exactly how many, but he must have dropped 3 big balls that were like potential touchdowns where he was just gone or open. And he was a great run after catch guy, 4.5-ish speed, maybe 4.5-ish, something like that, but more like 4.5. But he could obviously really run after catch, and he just dropped, I don't know, he might have dropped 4 big balls in that game, and that ended up being the game. This is the game right after 9/11. Check it out. You can probably find it on YouTube. I was there, and Terrell sat almost like comatose at his locker for like 15 straight minutes after the media had been allowed in, just staring. And he just couldn't talk, wouldn't talk. I never seen anything quite like it. And if you followed Terrell's career, these are shaky stats because they're kind of, everybody keeps them differently because it's kind of subjective what a drop is. I might see a drop differently than you see a drop, but whatever. There were at least 3 times that some of the people who kept drops, some of the services who kept drops, had Terrell leading the league in drops. And I was around a lot, watched a lot, and he was a ball dropper, a big moment ball dropper. And it bothered me, and it bothered the 49ers enough that once they got through another year with Terrell, that's when I nicknamed him Team Obliterator, Terry Donahue finally just said, enough. He is more trouble than he is worth. And you remember the fiasco trying to get him. First, it looked like he was going to Baltimore and Ray Lewis. That might have been the greatest thing that ever happened to Terrell. But one thing led to another. Paperwork didn't get filed by Owens' agent at the time, and he winds up in Philadelphia. And I was fascinated. I thought, well, maybe this will be the change of scenery that he needs, because it had gotten so bad. Just to put San Francisco to bed, there's a game, ironically, against Randy Moss, and I'm foggy. It must have been the next year, 2002, pretty sure. But it was at the old Metrodome in Minneapolis, and I was there. And every time that Terrell went up against Moss, he got mossed. And this is just me. Randy Moss, is on a whole nother level from Terrell Owens. I don't care what you say. And off the field, they both had their issues. They're different kinds of issues. But I'll say right up front, I don't think it's fair that Randy Moss got straight into the Hall of Fame on the first ballot if Terrell Owens didn't. But I know what the voters are thinking. It's just eye test. Randy Moss just revolutionized the game. He ran 4.2 at like 6'4", 64 inches, ran 4.240. And that 98 year alone, that was just like, for me, Hall of Fame is transcendent. It's weird. Here's my point about Hall of Fame. If you ask me, is he a Hall of Famer? I'm going gut feeling. If I hesitate for 1 second and have to think, he's not. But that's my Hall of Fame. That's my criterion. Would be, that's it. As simple as that. If you ask me, is Tom Brady a Hall of Famer? Well, obviously you just say, yes, he's a Hall of Famer. I don't know. Let me think of some long time. Obviously like Jerry Rice. We can argue all day whether he's the greatest receiver. But if you'd ask me during Jerry Rice's career, Hall of Fame? Well, yes. Yes, he's in the Hall of Fame. I mean, there's just no doubt. A lot of people, even Bill Walsh, thought there was a period of his career when he was the best football player ever. I think he said that at his ceremony when they had Jerry Rice Day at that was Terrell Owens Day. I was there for that game. I was still in Chicago. But the point is, Randy Moss gets in because he's transcendent. He just like in 1998. And by the way, I was working in Chicago then. I just pounded the table. Bears have to take Randy Moss. You just have to take him. He's a life changer. No, he showed up late for their interview when they flew him to Chicago. He's a bad guy. He's got this issue. Notre Dame, this problems. He had this big fight issue, blah, blah, back in high school, blah, 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 blah. I said, I don't care. He's transcendent. He's going to change your life. And he goes up to Minneapolis with Dante Culpepper throwing home runs to him. And remember what he did to Dallas on Thanksgiving Day that year? My God. He was taking it out on every team that passed on him in the draft because he wanted to be a Dallas Cowboy. So they end up playing faithfully on Thanksgiving that year. This is 98, Thanksgiving. And he caught 3 balls that day at Texas Stadium. And those 3 balls went for like, I won't get this exactly right, but it was like 51-yard touchdown, 53-yard touchdown, and 53-yard touchdown. 3 balls, cross-country touchdowns. He just ran through defenses. He was the equivalent for you Cowboy fans of Bullet Bob Hayes, the Olympic gold medal sprinter who just revolutionized the game in the 60s under Tom Landry with Don Meredith throwing home runs to him. He changed the way you had to defend the deep ball in the National Football League. Well, so did Randy Moss. So when you ask me, because I witnessed so many head-to-heads, and I know it's not quite fair when it's receiver on one team versus receiver, and that drives receivers crazy. They're the divas, and they're the head cases of pro football because they can't control getting the ball. Terrell Owens wanted to play basketball because you can get a hold of the basketball, and he had this fantasy he could be a pro basketball player, which he couldn't. I've seen him play. He's a good player, but obviously at 6'3", what are you going to do? Play point guard, but he's a little stiff. But the point is he loved basketball, and I get it because you could actually touch the ball a whole lot in basketball. And he'll go to the celebrity game at the All-Star weekend and be the MVP. Way to go. But the point is, against Moss, he would just get Moss because Randy Moss would just rise and shine. And in that game at the Dome that day in Minneapolis, again, I was there. I forget the stats. I used them on Undisputed the other day, but it was like Moss caught like 8 for 160. It was just outrageous what he was doing. And Terrell had 5 for 55, and he got mossed. And it just killed him. So that was the famous rant up and down in front of the bench. Greg Knapp, the coordinator, was down on the sideline, sitting on the bench, just trying to ignore him. And back and forth, ranted Terrell Owens. And listen, Terrell, I have high regard for him because he's so media savvy. He knew he needed to take some of the focus off himself and how Randy Moss was lighting him up and lighting up that stage. And all of a sudden, if he could create a controversy, that would be the story the next day. Well, not only did he create that controversy, but he goes straight in the locker room and gets literally up on a box, which became his soapbox. And Terrell Owens said that Jeff Garcia, his quarterback, needed to be demoted. Jeff Garcia was really good, a Pro Bowl quarterback. He needed to be demoted? Jeff Garcia did a lot of great things for Terrell Owens. He really did. Jeff, again, an overachiever out of Canada, and I get that. But still, he had to kind of wind up to throw it, but he could really throw it. And Terrell Owens wanted a former 7th-round pick named Tim Rattay to be the quarterback. Well, this is outrageous, but it was brilliant on his part because the next day all the stories were ranting back and forth at Greg Knapp, as I called him, Greg Take a Nap. I was not a fan. He's still afloat. I think he's Atlanta's quarterback coach now. He's been all over the league. But Tim Rattay for Jeff Garcia was so outrageous that it just exploded into the headlines and the talk shows all the next day. So Terrell brilliantly took the focus off how he got mossed and on to what was going on behind the scenes. But all this added up to, finally, Terry Donahue saying, I'm out, man. What am I getting in return? More trouble than he's worth. Couldn't reach him, couldn't sort of bring him into their fold. There's no way he could be a team leader. He was a solo act who was often just completely out of control. And he had gotten into the dances and he'd become a national celebrity. And they were funny. They were great. He and Chad Johnson belong in a separate wing of the Pro Football Hall of Fame of entertainers, because both of them are gifted entertainers with their get your popcorn ready and taking the popcorn from the cheerleader. And I was there the night, it was a Monday night game in Seattle when Terrell ran into the little box behind the end zone in that new Seattle stadium. And from his, I think it was his accountant or somebody, handed him a Sharpie. Handed him a football. He had the Sharpie in his sock, and he signed the football. It was brilliant. Just great. Great self-promoter, Terrell Owens. And, yeah, he goes on to Philadelphia, and I thought, okay, he and McNabb are tight, soulmates, roommates in camp. Maybe this will be good for him. Maybe this will be, he'll find his Valhalla in Philadelphia. And they had a pretty strong connection for a little while, and you know what happened. He predictably turned on Donovan McNabb, and he's still turning on him. They're still taking shots at each other. And when they finally got to that Super Bowl against the Patriots, the last time Philly played the Patriots, they lost, obviously, in the fourth quarter. And then after in the weeks afterwards, predictably, Terrell Owens accused McNabb of hyperventilating. Did he say he threw up in the huddle? Or like he was just gagging, literally choking in the huddle. And what looked like a love fest turned into a hate fest between those two. And then, of course, Terrell Owens turned on his coordinator, Brad Childress, and there was a big report about they nearly came to blows. And Childress screamed him out of a meeting, an offensive meeting. And then Andy Reid got into it, and Terrell, they were lovey-dovey to start with, and then it just got ugly. And I've talked to a number of players. I've known a bunch of players from that team, worked with a bunch of players from that team on ESPN. They don't like Terrell Owens. They respected his ability, but they just said he tore their team apart. Okay? And that team finally sent him home. Do you remember this? They just sent him home. Whatever that rule is, he was out. And again, it's so bad. It's just splitting another team that had a chance. And obviously they got to the Super Bowl, but I always bring this up. My partner Shannon Sharp is obviously in the Hall of Fame. He's there tonight in Minneapolis, and he loves him some Terrell Owens. He's got sort of an affinity for him because Shannon came from a pretty tough background in rural Georgia, and Terrell came from a pretty rough background. Again, both raised by grandmothers in part. Shannon had a strong grandfather also, but I think Terrell was just grandmother in rural Alabama. So Shannon has affinity for him, and Shannon gets angry about why Terrell wasn't, this was the third try for Terrell, but why the first 2 times he didn't get voted into the Hall of Fame. And I say, well, then you just don't get it, because I'm going to say this one more time. I've said it many, many times. I don't hate Terrell Owens. I just saw too much. I talked to too many people who did not think he was Hall of Fame caliber. I kind of like Terrell. I've talked to him many times, interviewed him many times on, and obviously for newspaper, and then had him on TV, back on ESPN. We've had him on Undisputed, again, 9:30 to noon Eastern Time, Fox Sports 1. We've had him on, I don't know, I've lost track, 3 times? And maybe we'll have him on again next week. I don't know. I'd be happy to have him on. And I told Shannon on the air the other day, from my heart, I'll be happy for Terrell, because this has haunted him for so long, if he does get in the Hall of Fame. And I also predicted he would get in the Hall of Fame, because he's so media savvy. He's basically conducted his own Hall of Fame campaign that's been built on shaming those voters into, oh, you've got it out for me. It's personal. It's a vendetta. I don't think so. I think they just are going on the facts. But I do think he successfully shamed them, and he turned himself into a sympathetic figure. And I think I had something to do with that. I think I helped that. Not that I want any credit for it, because I don't. But I don't hate Terrell. I enjoy having him on the show. I enjoy sparring with him, bantering with him just about sports. I think he's smart. I think he's unique. I think he has a rare sort of vision and sense of humor. And we've had him on with Eric Dickerson. We've had him on several times with Chad Johnson. And I just enjoy that spark, that dynamic. So I don't hate him, but I know too much. I just talked to too many of those Eagles. It was just so ugly and bad that that guy's disqualified from my Hall of Fame. I'm sorry, he's disqualified. Then he goes to Dallas. And obviously, Jerry Jones is all about box office. And Terrell is all-time box office. He can make some big catches, but he can fill those seats. Not that Jerry needs to fill them exactly, but he can build those ratings. He can explode those ratings. And obviously, to bring Terrell Owens to the place where once upon a time, before he was Terrell Owens, that was the ultimate first welcome to the world for Terrell Owens, was when he ran to the Star at Old Texas Stadium and did his, on the Star. He stood on the Star, and it was the ultimate sign of disrespect for the Cowboys. And kid, what was his name, Teague from Alabama, charged him and knocked him off the Star. And those were the days the 49ers were way better than the Cowboys, and he was rubbing their nose in it right on their sacred Star. Way to go, Terrell. So the prospect of Jerry Jones bringing that guy who had defamed the Star to Jerry World was just outrageously great for Jerry. But a Hall of Fame coach named Bill Parcells was coaching the team and wanted nothing to do with Terrell Owens, and I couldn't blame him. I'm sorry, I couldn't blame him. And he wouldn't even refer to Terrell by name. He called him the player this, the player that. And I'm sorry, let me backtrack 1 second, because I got off track on this. I should finish up the Philly before I forget it, because this is very important. Terrell did get to the one Super Bowl with the Eagles, and let me finish that story. Remember, Terrell didn't play because he got the name horse collar came. The rule came from the play on which Terrell got horse collared, got yanked down by the back of the pads, and broke his leg. And so he missed the first 2 playoff games won by the Eagles and Donovan McNabb to get them to the Super Bowl. And I've had several players off that team tell me that as much as Terrell gutted it up using that, hyperbaric chamber, he tried everything to get the leg right in time for the Super Bowl, that it was somewhat of a handicap to Donovan McNabb. I always make this case, Brady can be even better without Gronkowski, because he gets so Gronk-centric. All the bad throws Brady makes, the forced throws, are always trying to get it to big old 87 against double coverage. And sometimes the forces go there. And obviously, last year there's no Gronk for the last 8 games. They won the Super Bowl. And this year there's no Gronk in the second half against Jacksonville and no Edelman. And they beat the hottest defense, the breakthrough coming-of-age defense, Saxonville, in the second half with no Gronk. So the point was, several of the Eagles made the case to me. They thought McNabb, who by that time was do not invite him with Terrell Owens. They were at each other's throats. But McNabb felt too, TO conscious, like I got to force the ball to him, and he couldn't run. And Belichick knew he couldn't run, so they let him catch whatever it was, like 9 balls for no touchdowns. He couldn't threaten the end zone with Terrell Owens because he couldn't run by anybody the way he could when his leg was right, and his leg clearly wasn't right. But whatever, he got to the one Super Bowl, had good numbers in the Super Bowl, and they lost the game. And the only way they got back in the game in the fourth quarter was on a deep pass from McNabb to that little speedster they had, Greg Lewis. So, now on to Dallas, and some great things happened on the field between Romo and T.O. I give you that. But some bad things started happening off the field, starting with the head coach versus the player. Remember, he'd show up Parcells in camp. He'd put on some Lance Armstrong gear and sit on the bike and just, it was like sticking his tongue out at Parcells. And bad went to worse, and there was that incident that I don't know exactly what happened, but it got ugly, where the 911 call from his townhouse and his publicist, and she was so upset because it looked like Terrell had tried to take his own life. And then he said, that's not what happened. And then she had that famous quote about I can't remember what the number she was. What was it? 5? I should have looked this up before I started, but there are 10 million reasons why he wouldn't take his own life, or whatever his salary was at that point, as in dollars. But Terrell had some issues, and he was having some issues that day. And thank God those issues didn't take him completely over the edge, and he's still with us. And yet, internally, the Cowboys began to come apart, and it had a lot to do with Romo coming apart, with Jessica Simpson, and I don't blame it all on Terrell, but those were the days when I grew up a Cowboy fan, went to my first game when I was 10 years old, in their second year of existence. Saw the St. Louis Cardinals play at in the old Cotton Bowl, where that's still there, but where the Cowboys first played. And those were the days when I was out. I was off the band. I couldn't be a Cowboy fan in those days. I just didn't like the vibe of that team. I couldn't support it. I just couldn't watch it. It just drove me crazy. And obviously, Romo goes to Cancun, and Jason Witten was involved in that, and Jessica and Jason's wife, and it was a bad look. And then they came back, and they lost to Eli at home, as Eli was on the way to upsetting Tom Brady in the Super Bowl, 2007. Big year, great year. That was post, was that Wade Phillips? But anyway, so the point was that it just ended badly again for Terrell Owens in Dallas, and he had a big incident in which he accused Romo of starting to throw only to Jason Witten, and he got into it with Todd Haley. Did Terrell Owens, the receivers coach at that point. Again, Haley's had all kinds of issues with other players, including Ben Roethlisberger, but there was a big shouting match battle there, and Jason Witten was very upset about it. And I heard from one Cowboy with whom I was very close, and he witnessed on the practice field that day, Jason Witten went up to Terrell Owens before practice, and he said, let's go right here. You want to do it? Let's just do it right here. Let's settle this right here, right now. And according to my eyewitness, Terrell wanted no part of Jason Witten. I'm not sure Terrell could handle Jason Witten. Jason's a big boy. What is he, 6'5", 250 maybe, 260, but whatever. He was steamed, and I'm glad nothing happened, but that's what I was told. And so it degenerated into that. And so another team he was on didn't break through as it should have, because they went that one year, 13-3. And again, some team obliteration by team obliterator. Well, so he's 3 for 3, and then he went on to other teams, and he and Chad had some success, but not playoff success together, obviously, in Cincinnati, and then he went to Buffalo. And then it looked like Pete Carroll was going to include him in the Seattle system, and He cut him in the preseason, which is pretty shocking to me. Terrell takes great care of himself. He's been in great shape. And as Shannon always points out, no off-field issues as far as arrest issues. So I give you that. If you're going to dock Terrell a couple of times from being in the Hall of Fame, if you're going to use his, it's not even off the field, it's locker room, huddle, internal negative impact. If you're going to keep him out of the Hall of Fame over that, all those issues at 3 different teams, then you have to penalize Randy Moss once. I thought that was hypocritical. Like, Randy, I don't want to go into all the gory details, but there are a lot of gory details on Randy Moss. A lot. And we've talked about him often on Undisputed. Again, you can see us 9:30 to noon Eastern Time, Fox Sports 1. We will be there Monday, and that's going to be a huge, hot show. And by the way, thank you for all who are watching for our ratings. They've just been explosive, and I'm so thankful. Thank you, God, and thank you to all you people out there. We've just been on a ratings roll, and we appreciate that very much because it has nothing to do with us and everything to do with you. So thank you for that, for watching this, and for watching 9:30 to noon Eastern daily on Fox Sports 1. But again, how can you put Randy Moss in after all the stuff that he did off the field and some of it on the field? It was a lot. He had an arrest and this and that. It's just it's a long laundry list of stuff. It's just stuff. Okay? So I think the voters are just saying Randy's just that good. It just outweighed and overcame and erased all the rest. And obviously there are a lot of people in a lot of Hall of Fames, not just footballs, who are bad actors. We get that. But for Terrell, I was just so involved. I talked to so many people. Again, players, coaches, front office, owners. I talked to so many who just found it impossible to deal with. Well, that's just not Hall of Fame behavior. That's just me. And I'll never back off that. If I had, I don't vote for the Hall of Fame, but if you ask me who's in my Hall of Fame, Terrell Owens is just not. And frankly, deep down, gut feeling, and I've never backed off this, I'm ashamed for the Hall of Fame that Terrell's in it. I just am. When you add up all the team obliteration, it's just wrong. And you can show me all the numbers, and I get all the numbers, and they're spectacular. But he wasn't a transcendent player. He was really good. There's also this hall, this sort of fictional hall that I came up with, the Hall of Very Good. I'll put Terrell in the Hall of Very Good. I just don't think he belongs in the Hall of Fame. But he conducted a very shrewd media campaign. He created incredible sympathy for himself. And I think he sort of shamed enough of those voters at a politically sensitive time that they finally said, okay, he's been punished enough. So that leads me to my final point about the Hall of Fame. Punishment. This is absurd to me. This is so arrogant. It's such empowerment for these voters that they get to punish various players by keeping them out once, twice, 3, 4, what was Shannon? 3 times. It took him, Shannon Sharp, my partner on Undisputed, 9:30 to noon Eastern, Fox Sports 1. Shannon, it took 3 times to get in. Is Shannon in the Hall of Fame? Yeah, he's just in the Hall of Fame. So why didn't he go in the first time? I don't know. So you try to pick his case to pieces, and sometimes it depends how many are going in at a certain time. I don't care. You're either in or you're not. Ray Lewis, there's a good one. Ray Lewis got in. Did he have off the field? Yep, he did. Is Ray Lewis a Hall of Famer? Yes. He's just a big, yeah. It's just yes. To me, in the pro football context, heck, I'll go this far, in the sports context, I hope I'm not forgetting anybody, Ray Lewis was the greatest leader ever. Yes. Like Brian Dawkins. I know Brian Dawkins. I worked with him at ESPN. I love him. But if you ask me, is he a Hall of Famer, I have to think for a second. I don't know. Would he be? He's not a first ballot Hall of Famer, so he got in on a second ballot. Well, he's either in or out. I don't know. I want him to be in because I like him. And you want to talk about salt of the earth, high character. That man has character. the flip side of Terrell Owens as far as a teammate and team leader. Okay, so I'll give you that one. But what did it take Chris Carter? I've lost track. Wasn't it like the 7th or 8th time? Okay, what is it? My teammate, obviously, on First Things First, which precedes Undisputed on Fox Sports 1 every weekday morning. But what is he in or out? He's either a Hall of Famer or he's not. Don't punish people. Don't discount them. Do they have asterisks? Should they have a number beside their, like engraved on their bust? Like, should Shannon have a 3 on there because it took him 3 times? Should Terrell have a 3 because it took 3 times? Should Chris have what? I can't remember what it was. 7 or 8 times, whatever it was. 5 times. I can't remember what it was. Just outrageous numbers of times where you have to just sweat and fret and feel shamed by the process where you don't get the call. You wait for the call and you don't get the call. And then you finally get in and it's like, I finally got in. But it took me X times. Okay. Joy Taylor, our moderator on Undisputed, 9:30 to noon Eastern, Fox Sports 1.